everyone, Sue Tetzloff with you here, co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Welcome to today's live. Today we're going to talk about the topic of productivity. So in some organizations that might be a four-letter word. In your mind it might be. It's not really our favorite topic, I don't think, to talk about as leaders. Or employees or in organizations is productivity, but obviously it's an important one, and not just because of the dollar signs related to it, right? The financial aspects. I mean, it's pretty easy for us to know that productivity impacts our finances, right? If we're spending too much on labor that isn't necessary to do the work, meaning we're unproductive, then obviously we're spending more dollars on labor than is needed to produce the outcome. So, of course, there's that impact related to the conversation about productivity. But I want to talk about some of the other impacts, and that's really the trend I wanted to bring forward into today's topic, was that we're seeing this trend. This has been going on for a while, since we started our company and we started to assess healthcare organizations very closely. So what we do when we're working with organizations is we'll study them, right? So we assess them. We're nurses, so we like to assess. So we'll study them. We'll study data, and then we'll observe, right? And so one of the interesting trends that we've picked up on over the years is that when we come across data, and I don't just mean financial data, when we come across quality data, patient satisfaction data, employee engagement data, and we're looking at, individual departments where they may be underperforming in things like quality, employee morale, high turnover, things of that nature, other operational indexes. So when we see this data where there's underperformance, where it could be better, maybe it's at the lower end in the organization, other departments are doing better in quality and patient satisfaction, etc. So we might want to focus in on that department and think about, what's going on there, right? And we might start to look at things such as staffing. And one of the things that we thought we would see as a trend was that in a department where quality scores are poor, where patient satisfaction was low, where engagement was low, where turnover was high, things like that, what we found most often was that they were a team, a work unit that was overstaffed. Chronically, persistently overstaffed. Not episodically, but chronically, persistently, the workload was such that there wasn't a constant, consistent flow or cadence of purposeful work to be done. What we thought we'd see was that the unit, the department, was understaffed. And the opposite was true. And then in departments that were pretty darn high performing, right? Patient satisfaction is high, quality scores are great, outcomes are great, high engagement, low turnover. We found that they were more often right-staffed or even slightly understaffed, if you wanted to use a definition of that. So we found this, we're seeing this trend, so much so that we keep saying we want to hire a researcher to study this for us, to really, do all of the statistical analysis that does the correlation between staffing and productivity, in essence, and performance results such as quality and patient satisfaction and other people indicators, right? So some of you might have attended years ago when we did our leadership summits. We used to teach a session specifically on finance and specifically on this issue of staffing. And the reason I bring it up today is I just had a lot of those conversations recently with individual leaders that I've been talking to as they, and have conversations about joining the greatness cohort, or maybe they are, you know, a potential partner where we're having a conversation about their specific results. And this topic or trend or assessment of, you know, areas where there's lower productivity is those areas where you know, things are maybe not performing as well. Not just the productivity, not just the finance, but everything. So when we teach the issue of productivity and finance and staffing in particular, what we you know, kind of want as the ideal is that there's always this continuous balance of supply and demand, so that the supply of people with their certain, you know, qualifications and skills, etc., that the supply of the volume of people and the skill of people and the experience and knowledge of people equals the demand for the volume, acuity, and the timing and complexity of the work to be done, and that there's just always this constant balance, right? That supply and demand are equal. And it's when, you know, they're out of balance that we start to run into, you know, an impact negatively on results, right? So not just on the feeling of morale and burnout of the people that are working a shift or a day or a week or always out of balance, but, you know, when this happens chronically and we're out of balance, what we end up with is a long-term impact, a chronic impact on results, okay? And that's true whether you're understaffed or you're overstaffed. So you're productive or unproductive, okay? So this imbalance is really at the heart of a ripple effect into all sorts of operational results, good or bad, right? And so the tips that we see for this in particular is in organizations, and mainly and often we work in organizations where there's a rural, small organizations, right? So so there's often a time where we'll see, for instance, a department where you have to almost, I'll use OB as an example. So if you're a small hospital and you run an OB unit, you might do 350, 400 deliveries a year in a low volume unit. And what might happen there is some days there's nothing going on, and other days you got lots going on, right? But you're always going to have a couple staff members there because a patient could walk in the door any minute, and 10 minutes later, you know, we had 0 patients and now we have a mom and a baby. And so you end up with this situation where, you know, there's just this constant, you know, fluctuation, yet you've got to keep this staffing there. And so what happens during those down times that are chronic and persistent is that that downtime isn't used for good. Okay, so if there's a day where the census and acuity and volume or workload is down, and you've got staff there, and there isn't a high enough volume or acuity or complexity of work, and you can't send them home, you can't send them away, you can't do other things with them, you know, to reassign them or whatever, what do they do during that downtime? Okay, so one of the things that we recommend with that is to think about turning downtime into useful, productive, meaningful time. Because if thought and pause is not put to that, what fills that vacuum? And what we know doesn't fill the vacuum just naturally is positive, proactive work that moves individuals, the team, the department forward, right? So that OB unit example again is, you know, making a determination that, you know, if there are not a high volume or acuity or complexity of patients for us to care for today, what are we going to do with our time and energy and focus instead that is useful, meaningful work? So it may be things like, doing our annual competencies related to, shoulder dystocia and hemorrhage. Or it might be that we're going to work on policy review and research, or we're going to work on, maybe we're a member of an employee-driven team and we're going to work on our action assignments for our team. Or maybe we're going to do some quality, statistic, and chart review kind of things. And some people might say, well, isn't that the job of the leader, right? Why would we, during our downtime as staff, do the work of leaders? Well, there really is this idea that we can promote everyone to the line of leadership. So if you think about those things I just mentioned as, policy work or research or quality review and that kind of stuff is only the work of leaders, then, obviously, employees aren't on that line of leadership contributing to the department or the organization moving forward. So the idea here is that it's everybody's work. Everyone can contribute to the organization being great, and that we should all be productive, doing meaningful work at all times, except for when we're taking our important, very important breaks, which we should take. I talked about that in last week's live about the importance of, taking our breaks. But in a full productive day, which does include time for our breaks, that time should be, have a natural rhythm of constant, continuous, purposeful work. And when those lulls come, the danger of that is, especially if they're chronic and persistent, and there's this letdown that there isn't productive, meaningful work to be done, then unfortunately that void gets filled with maybe things like chitter chatter that isn't so helpful, sitting at the desk, really doing nothing, and then when there is work to be done, then it feels more difficult because your energy goes down and etc. I like to equate this to years ago when I was going through nursing school. I worked actually all through middle school, high school, and then into college. I worked as a waitress and a bartender. And on those really busy days and nights or shifts, man, you came in and you were just a hopping and you were going and you were on fire and you were serving your customers. You had a smile on your face, you had pep in your step, and you were just going, right? But on those nights where it was kind of slow, right? It was a slow shift. You would think that we would be out there with our very few customers, just slathering love on them, giving them all of our time and attention because we didn't have to divide it between too many things because it was kind of slow. But instead, you could usually find us back in the kitchen, kind of huddled together with the chef, kind of, chitter chattering, and our poor customers were out there needing something, right? And so there's just something about the humanness about us and about a pace or rhythm of work that's kind of that sweet spot, right? And it's on the higher end of difficulty, right? It is. So that our adrenaline is high, so that there's, energy in us and focus on us. Our brain is firing, those kind of things. It takes a certain rhythm. It takes a certain amount of, volume and acuity and complexity to get us in that performance level. And if the work isn't inherently organized in a way that allows for that, then we have to figure out how to make that happen, right? And fill that void with things that are purposeful and meaningful so that letdown that is natural and human in us doesn't happen, right? But so I'm talking mainly about, the work of day-to-day staff who are right there, in the thick of it, right on the front lines, and then being productive. Of course, it could apply to everyone, leaders, physicians, etc. But when I'm talking about the frontline staff working in this cadence of productivity, where it's that sweet spot of higher end of difficulty, complexity, and volume that keeps us sharp and going and doing meaningful, purposeful work. I'm talking about that, but as leaders, it's often our responsibility to organize the systems and the staffing and the schedules and all of that to make that happen, right? And so this is another area where we would use this, mantra that we have: do it with them, not to them, right? So if in the area where you're a leader that you haven't hit that sweet spot of supply and demand always being in balance, and that you don't have good mechanisms and systems for the supply and demand of the people that you have working and the volume of work to be done, and that it gets in and out of balance, and you don't have good mechanisms for right sizing it, being proactive to schedule appropriately for it, but then having those good contingency plans to monitor and adjust it throughout a day or a shift, etc., and to have downtime procedures and other mechanisms for what you do when the workload shifts. If you don't have those systems designed and worked out well, and you know that this chronic persistent issue of understaffing, overstaffing, not getting this right is happening in your world, and yes, the ripple effect of that is going to impact quality, employee morale, engagement, patient satisfaction, finances, etc. This imbalance is going to impact all of those things. It can't not. Then what you need to do is engage your team to fix it, right? Put them on the line of leadership, do it with them, not to them, to figure out the systems. How do we proactively organize our work, our assignments, our schedules, our staffing, all of that, so that we can be in balance actively as much as possible, that we can predict, that we can, proactively go at that, and then have the best laid contingency plans for being able to monitor and adjust that, and develop and devise a system that can be done in an employee-driven way. So they help develop it, they help monitor it, they help adjust it all along the way. And like I mentioned, if there's downtime, they know exactly what they dig into. That's productive, meaningful work that brings them up to filling their time with productive, meaningful things, right? So they don't slip into that lull of, being there, being present, but not being at that optimal state of productivity. Okay, so this is certainly one of those topics that challenge many or most leaders. It's come up a lot lately, as I mentioned, as something that leaders are struggling with, balancing the supply-demand equation, the ripple effect on their results, not knowing what to do about it, and really, the trend of this being out of balance, that people aren't in that sweet spot enough. That trend is something we're seeing all the time. And, the systems and the mechanisms for writing them are something that needs to be devised and developed with our employees, not something we do to them. I'll give an example of a nursing department that really struggled with this. It was a department that grew really quickly. They used to have a low census, and now they have a really high census. Their acuity went up, recruited doctors that do other things, new things. So the acuity, complexity of their patients went up, the volumes of their patients went up, the amount of staff they needed, the skills of those staff needed went up. So we've got all of this dynamic going on with balancing the supply-demand equation. And then what was also happening was there was a huge influx of census in the unit. So there was this, they might start the day on this unit with a census of 30 something. They might end the day with 40 something, and it might go up and down several times, even throughout a 12-hour shift, right? So keeping that in balance the whole time is certainly a tricky maneuver, right? And the leader was basically spending all of her time just monitoring and adjusting, monitoring, making decisions about adjusting, right? So the leader was getting behind on having time to be able to work on other things, right? Like 2 or 3 goals in her department that needed to be accomplished, some improvements that needed to be made, some systems that needed to be improved. But because all of her time and energy was being focused on monitoring and adjusting to keep this in balance, she knew here that she had an opportunity to engage her employees in a new way, to be able to look at that monitoring and adjustment system and figure out how to do that very, very well in a way that employees could do it. So 24/7, 365, it doesn't take the work of a leader to be able to keep the team at that optimal level of productivity where great results are going to happen. Okay, so once the employees and leaders work together to make that happen, then you can imagine that now it's done probably better because it's done by the staff in a more timely, focused way. It matters to them very much that it's right. And so they take ownership for it and they make it happen. And then the leader then can work on some of those other problems, issues, goals in the department that need the time and attention, but they're being robbed just to get this right, okay? So productivity is certainly an important aspect of running a great healthcare department or organization, and getting this right is not just about money. And in fact, if you wanted to just take that off the table and it wasn't at all about labor costs, and it was just about quality and your, important people metrics and your important patient satisfaction metrics, if it was just only about that, let's talk about it as the real problem that it is, right? That getting this right, productivity right, has a huge impact. That's the trend we see. It impacts all of that. Being understaffed, being overstaffed leads to bad results, and not just financial ones, okay? But results that matter in every pillar. So do it with them, not to them. Make downtime productive time. Get your employees on board and engaged to help you with the proactive work of organizing these systems to be productive, and then to monitor and adjust it. It will be one of the biggest gifts that not only you as a leader can give to yourself, is to engage and empower your employees in this way to get this right. But for sure, it's a gift to your employees, it's a gift to your patients when you get results, those positive, amazing results, when you get this right, okay? So yes, this productivity might be one of those things that might feel negative to you, because too often in organizations, it's linked to finance and being productive and labor costs. That is a good reason. We should be great fiscal stewards, but the more compelling reason to get this right is for your employees and for your patients, okay? So I compel you today to kind of pay attention in a new way. Look at this in a new way, that it's important for everything, and that it's so important to everything that it's one of those top things that we should be engaging and empowering, and do it with them, not to them, our employees, okay? So I hope this will encourage you to look at that topic of productivity in a broader scope, and in a way that makes you see these opportunities where you can create owners in your employees, elevate them to the line of leadership with this, and let them be very helpful in designing, monitoring, and adjusting the systems that get this right. And the ripple effect of this is you'll see amazing positive results in many, many aspects of your outcomes, okay? So have a great rest of your week, everyone. And if we can be helpful on topics such as this, please go ahead and use our website, capstoneleadership.net, to be able to reach out to us and have a phone call. It's a great way to get to know you better. It's hard to do that in this group just through the chat or just through comments and whatever. So we like relationships. We like knowing people. We like, our tribe of people that are in healthcare. And so if you need to reach out to us and schedule a call to chat about all things amazing related to great results in healthcare, please feel free to use that spot on our website. That's what it's for. We'll be happy to share resources with you that maybe we haven't mentioned during these kind of events, point you in the right direction, let you know about some of the other things that we do that might be helpful to you. So please feel free to do that. We really do want you to feel like you can access us in that way. So so as we're closing out here on this Friday, I hope you all have great plans for R&R on a weekend. It's beautiful here and sunny in Sault Ste. Marie, as you can probably see, very hot and warm, which yeah, is kind of a nice change from our long winter that we had. So we'll see you next week in live, and look forward to hopefully having a call with you soon if you take the opportunity to schedule on our website, capstoneleadership.net. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.